Welcome to Put Simply, the podcast that puts what's happening in the world simply without compromising on the details. Erdem Koch is my name, Ozan Ibrisim and Rodney McCune my co-hosts. Gents, good to be back.
Hi guys.
Good to be with you.
Well, US President Donald Trump is rounding up a trip to Southeast Asia where so many things have happened following a trip then over to South Korea where he has met with the Chinese president and just hours ago announced some changes to the tariffs imposed on that country. Before we get to that, Ozan, give us a background on the on-again, off-again tariffs that US President Donald Trump announced at the start of this year on China, and tell us where we are now before we get to the significance of the events over the last few hours.
So yeah, it's quite a significant event. The announcement's just been made, so I'll have to apologize for not having all the details at this point in time. But of course, it started with the 10% fentanyl tariff that was put on Chinese goods. Of course, this is on top of the tariffs that were on Chinese goods that he had implemented in his first term, and then the Biden administration had maintained. And then in March, he added another 10%. In April, he added another 34%, and at that point, I think it brought it up to 54%. And then in May, they both of the sides agreed to scrap the kind of triple-digit tariffs that had gone up to 145%. And they said that they would maintain the tariffs at 10%, and then. But the US continued its 20% levy over the fentanyl issue. And then he very recently, I believe, in the last hour or two, has decided to bring down the tariffs, which I believe it means that the tariffs on Chinese goods will be 47%. But it's very unclear at this point in time what products or what goods it refers to. Is it a blanket 47% tariff, etc.? Still kind of unknown, and I believe the White House will be briefing journalists in the coming hours. But overall, I think it's a positive step that they're talking. I'm not sure what this whole on and off tariffs kind of discussion, how actually productive that is for the global economy. But I think, if you're looking at it from the point of view of the bigger picture, it's good that they're talking, and it's good that, they've agreed, I believe, to have a number of other meetings. I believe Trump is going to visit in April, and then that's going to be followed by President Xi Jinping going to Washington a few months after that. So positive news, I think, for not just geopolitics, but also, the global economy. And funnily enough, or unsurprisingly, they have briefed journalists that Taiwan was not discussed.
So an interesting result in terms of obviously, with tariffs on Chinese goods being reduced, it's a clear win for China. Trump has said that the meeting was a huge success. But what does China get out of this, Rodney, beyond the reduction of tariffs?
I guess a recognition that they're at least an equal partner in this relationship of global management. And I see that Chinese state media has just put out a readout from the meeting where they've said there's a consensus to resolve major trade issues and areas of potential cooperation include illegal migrants, cyber fraud, money laundering, AI, and that China and the US can demonstrate the responsibility befitting major powers working together to accomplish outcomes for both nations in the world. So it's a shared leadership positioning that China's getting out of this shared global leadership. But it also looks like from that readout, there's very little detail in what's actually been agreed. And again, from what we know about Trump and what he thinks is a deal and what often takes a lot longer to get into the weeds of, he basically presumes if they haven't fallen out dramatically, they must have agreed everything. I know that the US has said that access to rare earths is going to be what they get out of it, against a decrease in tariffs, but perhaps it lends itself to this sort of better cooperation and so on. But I mean, it may all be subject to Trump's next mood swing because someone says something which sort of irks him. So it's positive, but I think we've got to be realistic about the volatility of one of the two leaders involved.
Today, of course, rounds up a trip to Asia. It started off in Kuala Lumpur, the Malaysian capital, on Sunday. He was joined by leaders there to sign a peace deal between Thailand and Cambodia, which Trump said was a momentous day for Southeast Asia and a monumental step. Was it, Ozan?
Well, I think in his mind, he was briefed that it was, or that certainly was his spin. But it became very obvious that when one of the parties, uh, being Thailand, the Prime Minister of Thailand, when he got up to speak, he was very intentional in calling this not a peace treaty, but a framework to work towards a peace treaty and an understanding, almost like when you sign a memorandum of understanding with someone that you kind of say that you're going to talk to one another and come up with the details of the peace plan. So there was some confusion there, quite a bit of media commentary around the way that this was phrased going into it. I don't know whether that was a surprise or whether the President Trump was trying to push this one through. But it seems like the Thais had a different view of what this actually was, compared to President Trump and the Cambodian delegation as well. The Cambodians were very clear around this being a peace treaty. Of course, this goes back to a border dispute that's been going on between Cambodia and Thailand for a very long time. This border dispute flared up again earlier this year in July, where there were serious deadly clashes on the border. And when you look at the kind of politics of it, obviously it's much more in Cambodia's interest to kind of come up with some sort of ceasefire that leads to a peace resolution. But it seems that the Thais had a different view. So again, like what Rodney said, whilst this administration is taking some very positive steps in trying to address some very difficult situations, I think we've got to take what the president and the administration says with a grain of salt when they are out there declaring, mission accomplished on certain things. I think the same goes for the China deal as well. Very positive that they're talking, but politically, China, I think, touching on what Rodney said, I think China, if you ask me, are the winners out of this. And it looks like that Trump has realized that he needs China and he needs to kind of, he's facing serious domestic economic problems, and he's got to deal with the China situation. So yeah, I think on the surface of it, great headlines, great media coverage, and just some very easy messaging, simple to understand messaging from the Trump administration on China, on the border dispute between Cambodia, Thailand, etc. But if the question is, you know, are these things resolved? I think the answer is a big fat no. I think it's too premature to kind of go out celebrating on those things. Another significant announcement was made by the administration and Malaysia. They agreed to a reciprocal trade agreement. I think that's the first one that's been signed in ASEAN, which effectively Malaysia is an important country for the US when it comes to the production and the packaging of semiconductors and chips. It's a strategic country, so it's no surprise that Malaysia was the first one in ASEAN to sign some sort of agreement. Again, the details are a bit they're a little bit more. There's a bit more detail than the other agreements that we've seen, but there's still a lot of kind of language around this being a framework, and both sides being committed to ensuring that they address certain things around global standards on manufacturing and all of these sorts of things. So this is not what you would consider a comprehensive trade deal. It's an agreement to work towards opening up trade between the two countries. Malaysia's tariffs still remain at 19%, which some people have been commenting that that's not much of a win for Malaysia. But I think overall, if you're looking at this from a very um, whole picture point of view, it's been a pretty successful week for President Trump. He's done 3 or 4 countries in 3 or 4 days, and he's out there doing things. The optics back home, I think, will look positive for him. But then it's up to wonks like us to kind of dissect the details, of which there are not too many.
Rodney, do you agree that it's been a successful week for Trump?
Yeah, certainly that Thai Cambodia peace announcement. I mean, he predicted there would be millions dead if it had have continued, or at least millions of lives have been saved. And I think the death count was 32 in July. So he clearly anticipated a significant escalation of that conflict. And I've heard that
that would be
he's going
about
to go.
25% of Cambodia's population.
Yeah. I've heard that he's also looking to resolve pub fights and other disputes over the coming months. So, he may well appear anywhere with a document asking people to sign it and shake hands. He's on a peace roll. However, separate from that, I think he has had a reasonably good week in Southeast Asia. The optics of him arriving in KL were great, and again in Japan, although a little bit cringy at times, were pretty good in terms of the new Japanese Prime Minister and Trump on the warship having their meetings. There seemed to be a genuine warmth and rapport there, which is obviously pretty good. So yeah, quite good for Trump.
Do you think that this Cambodia-Thailand peace agreement, that is apparently not a peace agreement according to one of the parties signing it, do you think this is the one that actually the Nobel Peace Committee looks at and says, this is it? We've got to, I mean, it's going to get them across the line on this one. Do you reckon that's the case?
I think he's so far beyond that line. I think they're going to have to create a new peace prize to give him for people who go above and beyond that of a Nobel laureate. So we'll have to have some further peace prize. Who knows what it'll be? I'll think of who it might be named after, but for next week.
Barack Obama? That
Yeah.
would be quite a classic. He would probably knock that prize back. But anyway.
Well, as Trump returns home now, he'll be faced with a particular, an interesting dilemma on next week when, of course, there are some elections happening and New Yorkers will elect the city's next mayor. Many ballots, of course, have already been cast with early voting opening last weekend. But it's the Democratic candidate Zohran Mamdani who is the clear favourite to win. And, of course, he's attracted the attention of the US president, who has called him a communist. Rodney, is it Mamdani's election to lose?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, neither of the other leading candidates are particularly exciting. He's done pretty well on the debates. He's campaigning well. He's clearly got issues around cost of living where he's connected with the electorate, and he's got a lead that it would be pretty difficult to lose. So I would expect that, yeah, he will be the winner, barring something remarkably dramatic in the closing hours or days of the election. So yeah, I think he's basically over the line. I'm not usually that clear in terms of prediction, but yeah, this one I think I am. Ozan?
Well, I mean, depending on which poll you look at, he's 10 to 15 points ahead of Andrew Cuomo and Sliwa, who's I think the Republican candidate. So many commentators are saying that it might not be that close. There might be a kind of late rush towards Andrew Cuomo, who of course used to be the governor of New York, and was embroiled in significant, I think, sexual misconduct scandals and various different problems that he faced during his governorship. So most people would put the word disgraced former governor Cuomo in front of his name, but suddenly I think New Yorkers are looking at the alternative Mamdani and saying, well, maybe Cuomo is a safer bet. I think Mamdani has I mean, he's a super political talent. Do I agree with a lot of the things he said? I mean, or he's talking about? Yes and no. He's not talking about radical things. He's talking about exactly the sorts of things that people want to hear at a time of high cost of living. He's talking about, providing more services to the underprivileged, and he wants to pilot a free bus service, all of these sorts of things, which obviously lend themselves to be easily labeled as communist policies by the Republicans. But I don't think that's working all that much. Certainly not in a place like New York, which is a very, very strong democratic city and very liberal, very progressive city. So I think he will win that. It might be closer than what the polls suggest, but it's going to be an interesting new era for New York City residents.
I think the interesting point of this is what the Democrats try to extrapolate out from it if he is, as we expect, successful, and what that means for how they run campaigns nationally and how they position themselves. And there'll automatically be a rush to sort of either adopt his method or reject it, where in fact how they run and position themselves nationally is going to be very different than in New York. So they just got to, if there is the success we're expecting, they've got to enjoy that moment without it getting too drunk on it. I think is probably the right approach.
I mean, you've got the Democratic establishment, shitting their pants, and running around doing whatever they can to kind of not have Mamdani elected, because obviously they're concerned that this is going to be a distraction for next year's midterm elections, and it's going to give some significant talking points to Trump and the Republicans. But look, I think at the end of the day, if the question is, does Mamdani appeal to America generally? The answer is, of course not. I don't think Mamdani is going to do all that well in Arkansas or other places that are kind of deep red states. But I hope that the Democrats are smart enough to distill out of this whole process what they need to distill, which is the Democratic base and voters are looking for a Democratic Party that looks more like what Mamdani has offered them and less like what they've seen in the last 10 years.
So just on that and taking it, I guess, a step further, one thing that a lot on the left and arguably on the right as well have been calling for the Democrats is to produce more candidates who have good communication skills, who can explain themselves better, who understand strategy and politics and geopolitics and the people of the US. We are seeing now Zohran Mamdani obviously come through. You've got the likes of Gavin Newsom over in California, who's looking to be like a promising or potential sort of Democratic candidate. Kamala Harris is sort of out there, promoting her book, 107 Days, which she writes about the moment that she was approached by US President Joe Biden to take over the running of the race and fight against Donald Trump. Of course, she then lost that election. She's saying she's not done yet. I mean, are we seeing a more, I guess, competitive landscape for the Democrats as they start to look ahead to 2028 and the US presidential elections and everything that will happen in the lead up to that?
I think what you're seeing is a realization that they're going to have to get on with the job now, and maybe they have, regathered themselves after the presidential election. And there are figures who are, I mean, Newsom's obviously very prominent, have been out there, promoting and positioning themselves for future bids at whatever level that might be. So yeah, there's an element to that, but all political parties just get back up and get on with it anyway. And I think they're in that phase rather than that they're much better organized or they've got some grand plan. I think they're just getting on with the business of, well, there's election, so I'm gonna have to fight it, so I might as well get organized, get the vote out, all those things you usually do, you know what I mean?
Look, I think that they've got a lot of issues. I think that they need to address. I'm listening to to Original Sin, by co-authored by CNN journalist presenter Jake Tapper. And when you read or listen to that book, you get a very strong understanding of how much of a trust deficit there is for the current democratic leadership, particularly for those who don't know, put simply, the book is effectively about Biden's decision to run and all of the kind of events around that, and it they really did deceive their base, and they deceived the country in terms of not properly disclosing Biden's true kind of state of health and what have you. And that sort of trust deficit, I think, takes a long time to get over, or to repair. And I think it's practically impossible to repair it with people who voters associate with that type of administration. And it's sad because I think President Biden did quite a lot of good things. Achieved a whole bunch of bipartisan legislation that was unimaginable. He managed to do it, but that whole end to his presidency, the Kamala Harris 107-day campaign, etc. I think many people were really put off by that, and and that's why when someone like Kamala Harris says that she's considering, or she might run, or is doing the kind of pre-work to run, etc., I don't think that's going to help the Democrats' case. I think they need fresh blood. I think they need to be able to go out there and give confidence to the Democratic base, but also voters, American voters, and say that we've turned over we've turned over a new leaf. We're a new Democratic Party, new leadership, vision, energy, etc. And that's what I was saying. I think before that Mamdani represents, maybe not people's policy views, but he represents a dynamic energy that people are yearning for.
Well, let's see the results of Tuesday's elections, and no doubt we'll analyse it here on Put Simply next week. Well, speaking of elections, a centre-left party in the Netherlands have appeared to be the biggest winner in the national elections overnight. It's a strong rebuke to the far-right party that had really been at the centre of politics of the Netherlands in the last election. Rodney, take us through the results of this.
Yeah, really interesting. This D66, which is a political party rather than a motorway name, which is what I initially thought it was, has had a significant success in this election. Rob Jetten will become, or is most likely to become, the youngest ever Dutch prime minister if he forms the government. And the right grouping under Wilders is not going to be in government, no matter what the outcome is. They're going back to the opposition benches, and it feels like a bit of continuity back to the Rutte government, because Jetten was, I think, deputy prime minister and certainly held ministerial posts. But yeah, this is quite a turnaround. What we don't really know though yet is whether this is a rejection of right populism or the feelings of a particular government, or whether they're going to go back into opposition, become popular again just by complaining about everything and making promises that they can't actually deliver. And again, the pendulum swings. So I think it's interesting. because we've had the Dutch flirt very heavily with far right populism. They've come back from that, but it's what happens next, I think, is probably the key issue, and that all remains to be seen.
I think Rodney is absolutely right. It's very difficult to I guess understand exactly what this means. I think probably further analysis needs to happen around D66, which I thought was actually a street gang in the US, not the highway number, but we or some sort of satanic grouping that's missing a six off the end. But look, yeah, I think it's hard to tell whether it is a rejection of far right populist politics that the Wilders Freedom Party represented. But what's, I guess, interesting is I believe it was 2 years ago in 2023, Geert Wilders won a significant election victory back then. So something significant must have gone wrong in 2 years for there to be effectively a turnaround and quite a significant loss. And I think Rodney touched on it. It may well be that kind of this centrist D66 party, led by the youngest person, Rob Jetton, the youngest potential prime minister. He's openly gay. Maybe his popularity increased over, very quickly over the last 6 months. He might have put forward an image that was kind of more in line with where electors were. It's hard to tell. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about Dutch kind of politics in the sense that I haven't been following the polls or anything like that all that closely. But I think yes, hard to kind of say that populism or people have rejected populism in the Netherlands, but also I think it needs to be looked closely that how a government loses such significant support in 2 years. So those are my thoughts.
They've also got like and what looks like now to be some sort of 5 or 6 party system. So it's not like the right have been wiped out, but they've certainly been given a bit of a bloody nose, and Jetton's gained 17 seats to go up to 26, which is a huge recovery for D66. But there's also been recovery from the I'm going to say the center right as well. So yeah, there's a consolidation around D66, so there might be some tactical voting. There's been a return to the mainstream right, and then there's been a drop off for Wilders and the populist far right. So yeah, Dutch. I think it's going to be difficult to know what the lessons of this are for a little bit longer, to know whether there's some sort of template that can be applied in other countries to create this shift back to the center.
Indeed, and just before we sign off for the week, Ozan, the US government is still shut down, but the Fed has reduced interest rates. What's the significance of that announcement and the likely flow-on effects?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Federal Reserve, who obviously is in charge of monetary policy in the US, announced that they were going to reduce it. Well, they did a reduction in interest rates during the week, 0.25%. So 25 percentage points. But they've made it pretty clear that effectively this will be the last one. So it's interesting kind of development, particularly during a government shutdown. And I can't imagine that there's a great deal of economic or a government shutdown kind of results in economic certainty. So it's an interesting decision from that point of view. Was there a lot of pressure from the Trump administration that kind of influenced the decision? I don't know. Certainly, President Trump hasn't been quiet about his desire for interest rates to be brought down. Has made it very clear that the Federal Reserve needs to bring them down. So I'm not sure exactly what the impact will be. I think inflation, whilst not at 2021, 22 levels, continues to be stubborn in the US. I think the labor market is very slow. Of course, President Trump has changed the whole dynamic by bringing in a whole new administration to the organization that's responsible for reporting on economic indicators such as the job market, etc. So I'm not sure, I'm not sure when those numbers come in, but there's certainly, there'll be some questions around those numbers, and they may look better than they are. There's no question that they're going to be politically motivated to make them look better. So, I think it's good that this will boost economic activity, and maybe address some of those really kind of sluggish or the concerns about a sluggish labour market. But obviously, inflation remains stubbornly high, and that's politically, I think that might be a bit of a tricky situation. Put simply for some of those listeners that may not fully understand it. Obviously, when you cut interest rates, money becomes cheaper. It allows businesses to borrow for less, not dissimilar to households, and more borrowing, more investment into the economy, more economic activity, and more jobs, obviously. But that can also mean that, from a traditional economic point of view, that raises inflation, or puts an upward kind of pressure on inflation. So yeah, let's see. I think the more interesting questions will be around the first few meetings of next year, particularly once kind of the whole year job numbers and economic growth numbers coming.
Well, I'd say the implications on that on not only the US economy, but of course the entire world. Gents, lovely picking your brains about the events of this week. See you next.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it already.